then it came with the term war on terrorism, but actually which brought together the United States and Israel, the idea of war on terrorism. But actually it started during the Reagan administration, when both Israel and the United States fought against mainly Libyan and Palestinian terrorism. So we had a process during the 1970s up to the 1980s where Israel was no longer only a state supported by the United States because of idealism, but Israel and the United States became true strategic partners. And hence, we can speak about the shift from friendship to strategic alliance. Thank you, guys. And now I'm ready to take if there are questions. And we can open a discussion. The floor is yours.
A little question.
Yeah.
I know during the first Arab-Israeli conflict in 1947 to 1949, United States and UK imposed embargo on army supplies to Israel. Why? That's all.
Well, yeah, it's you are right in your assumption that the United States and the United Kingdom imposed an arms embargo on Israel. It is absolutely true, but it's not the whole truth. Because the truth is, what you should say is they didn't impose an arms embargo on Israel, but on all those participated in the war in 1948. That means that the embargo applied also on the Arabs. Now, the reason for why they applied, basically the American attitude until a certain point, which was well deep into the 1980s, the American concept was that we are not going to help people to participate in an arms race. And if there is a war, if there is a threat of an arms race, we will stay away from that. And since in Palestine there is a war, then we are going to stay away and an arms embargo will be imposed. Now, that happened in 1947. In April 1948, the Security Council imposed official arms embargo on the states in the region. Now, you need to remember that the imposition of the arms embargo on Israel was meaningless in the sense that, in any case, neither the United States nor Britain supply arms to Israel. So it is not that they did not supply something that they did supply before. They just said, we didn't supply arms to you so far, and we won't continue supplying arms to you. The effect of the arms embargo was much more meaningful to the Arabs, because the Arabs used to get arms from Great Britain, not from the United States, but from Great Britain. And now Great Britain was no longer allowed or wished to supply arms to the Arabs. Now, Israel did manage to get arms during the war from the same Czechoslovakia that gave arms to Egypt in 1955. So what happened was that because of the arms that Israel got from Czechoslovakia and due to the very developed arms industry in Israel, Israel did not really suffer from any shortages in arms. It was basically the Arabs who suffered from shortages. For example, when they suffered, when they had broken military tools, they could not get replacements. And at a certain point, for example, they ran out of ammunition and they couldn't get new ammunition. So it was the Arabs who basically were more affected by the arms embargo than Israel. So the answer why is that because that is what the United Nations is doing in case of a war, impose arms embargo on the belligerents. As to the effect of that embargo, actually Israel was in a better position because of the embargo.
But another, excuse me if I have a commentary.
Sorry, Vladimir, I didn't hear you well. Can you repeat that?
So if I can say something, I asked you if I can say something. Yes,
yeah.
Something we should look at is the quality of the weapons which were provided. Because I understood that back then USSR and Soviet Russia even had sent weapons which were confiscated from Nazi Germany. I mean, quality couldn't be compared with the guns were sent from the United States to Israel.
Yeah, it's a good point. You are making a good point. And the reason that you are making a good point, because you are giving me the opportunity to say you are wrong. And and because the whole warfare, I didn't want to get into that, but since you raised that, I'll speak about that then. Now, basically, the 1948 war was really a primitive war. Besides, no one really had tanks, for example. No one really had tanks. The Syrians had very few, very low-level tanks, and the Egyptians had some. Israel had about 8 to 10 tanks, which broke almost immediately when they started to use it. So essentially, the 1948 war was a really infantry war. It was a kind of war that no one really was fighting already in 1948. So Israel got the weapons that allowed Israel to fight in that kind of war. And Jordan, for example, had no tanks at all. All it has was armored cars. So basically, in terms of the military balance, Israel was in a better shape and in better condition than the Arabs.
Policy pro-Israel in comparison with the Democrat Party, but most of the American Jewish still vote with the Democrats. Can you explain why?
Yeah. First, I think that some of the premises that you make are not. I'm not sure that you are completely right. I think that I don't think that the Democratic Party is not supportive of Israel, and we need to remember that there is a distinction which the Americans do and others do between the government and the state. Now, there can be an argument between the government, but basically, I don't think that the Democratic Party is not friendly to the state of Israel. Now, they have issues with, for example, with Bibi Netanyahu. But if you look at the nature of the support that President Obama, for example, who if you will ask many Israelis and Jews, he will not going to get the medal of the biggest supporter of Israel in the eyes of many Israelis and Jews. But this is wrong. President Obama, the support to Israel during the presidency of Obama was one of the largest and significant. And there are debates, there are arguments between the Bibi's government, the Benjamin Netanyahu government, and the administration, the Democratic administration of Obama, for example. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be a change toward the state of Israel. You could expect the change, or you could expect someone to change the course of American foreign policy would be Trump. But even Trump, who is really almost unpredictable, even Trump stuck to the old concept of supporting Israel out of idealism. So if I have to make a prediction, and please don't come back to me if I fail with the prediction, I warn you, but if I have to make a prediction, I would assume that the course of American foreign policy toward Israel, even in the next administration, whoever will be the president, will remain about the same in its attitude toward Israel.